Step 1 is to prepare your canvas. Most canvas that are purchased at a craft store are primed. However, if yours is not, make sure to coat with gesso, a chalky white primer. This will take a little tooth out of the canvas. I get mine at Michael's, and I'll have a link for that in the description area below the video. Once primed, add a midtone to the entire surface. I like orange. It's just a mixture of Grumbacher red and cadmium medium yellow. This will add to the overall look of the canvas, giving it a continuity if you let some of it peek through the layers. Also, having a midtone on your canvas will help you gauge your values better. Values are how dark and light your colors are. Some people call this grounding your canvas or underpainting. In step 2, you'll need to draw your subject onto the canvas using pencil, charcoal, chalk, or even paint. If you do not know how to draw, you're welcome to transfer your image using my traceable and good old-fashioned carbon paper. I have links for the traceable and the carbon paper in the description area. In step 3, I mix ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow medium to make a realistic looking green. In small crisscross-like brush strokes, I paint around the image, cutting in the flat edge of the brush and filling in with the full side of the brush. I add a dark green first, and then I add more and more yellow to my mix. I paint about 3 layers, letting a little of each previous layer show through, just to give it depth. I spend extra time painting the edges of my canvas. This will give me more options when choosing a frame. Depending on the frame I choose, the sides may show, and it's easier to paint them now rather than later. After my background is blocked in, I bump up the lights and darks. I think about where my light source is coming from, and I put that in as my lightest background color. Then I put my shadows in on the opposite side, using my photo as a reference. Murphey will tend to appear like he is floating if I don't visually set him down with these dark values. The shadow color is a mix of a lot of ultramarine blue, a little bit of Grumbacher red, and a tiny amount of cadmium yellow medium. Here I'm mixing a medium green for my grasses. Now I'm not going to put every blade of grass, I'm just going to do the gist of it. So the strokes will be larger at first, and then they'll get smaller and lighter as I move up in value. I dab the paint on using the edge of my large flat brush, letting a little of the dark speak through. I'm also working wet on wet, so I'm getting a few other value mixes. I like to start with the darkest value and move up to the lightest values. So in step 4, I mix what I call a colorful black using my 3 primaries. I use a lot of ultramarine blue, about half Grumbacher red, and a little bit of the cadmium yellow. This makes a nice warm black. It might not be black enough for a black dog, but it'll be a nice color to start with for blocking in. Step 5 is the midtones. This is a large section of the painting because this is what bridges the darks to the very lightest, so I call them bridge colors. There's just a lot of colors in between your darkest color and your light color, so there's a lot of mixing involved. Everywhere the sun hits Murphy's fur, it appears to be a little lighter than the black that he is, so I make sure to put that in to make him look more 3D. For that color mix, all I do is mix a little white, maybe a little yellow, maybe a little red, to the mix I already had, that colorful black. You could also mix white with Grumbacher's raw umber, and that will also give you a lighter color that would simulate a lighter black and the sun glistening off Murphy's fur. Step 6 is when I put in my lighter hue values. Now, this isn't the lightest values. Murphy is a black and white dog. However, if you look closely, his white areas have shaded areas. And for him to appear 3D, I add those subtle shades, working from the darkest white to the lightest white. My first mixture is ultramarine blue, white, and then I pop in a little bit of that colorful black mixture that I used earlier. step 7, I moved to my number 3 round brush and I put in all the details and the highlights. Now these will be some of my darkest darks and some of my lightest lights and anything that isn't the main part of my subject. In this case, it would be his bow, his little harness, and the eyes. I snapped this photo myself, and I'm not a photographer per se, so I didn't capture his eyes the way I remember them. So I'm going to paint more brown in them as if there's more light on them. Painting from photos has its limitations, but don't let that limit your artistic license. Trust your instincts as an artist and paint the feeling that you had when you were there. It will show in your artwork. I don't often use Mars black, but Murphey is very black and very white, and so I'm getting out a very dark black. It's a cooler black, and adding in that as my detail color. I still want some of my colorful black to show through, so I'm not completely covering my first layer of dark. Noses can be tricky. They're a different texture than fur, and so they reflect light differently. Also, they're not as round as you might think they are. I try to paint in the areas that are reflecting light by seeing them as shapes. It's important to get the subtle differences in the hues and the values correct. Here I made his ear a little bit too thick, so I'm making a little bit of that background color and kind of using it as an eraser to take off some of the ear so I can kind of fix that little corner right there. It's an important area, so I feel like it's worth mixing the color and getting it done right. not to get too carried away with whiskers. Just a couple will do. If you put too many, it draws the eye to that immediately and becomes the focal point. Here you see I've added Theo Violet to my palette for the cool pink color in the Bose fabric, and also bright aqua green by Liquitex for the mint green color. I think trying to mimic fabric is a fun challenge, and I don't try to do it hypo-realistic. I kind of just want the gist of it to get the idea that that is a fabric pattern, but I just don't want every detail because it takes away from the portrait, the focal point, which is Murphey. create perspective, or more of a 3D look, I keep a lot of detail in the foreground, and I don't do as much detail in the background. using a slightly moistened paper towel to kind of soften the edges of my paint strokes. If you like a lot of texture, grab a palette knife. It's fun to see what happens when you scrape it along your canvas and make different marks with it. It adds a lot of interesting texture. It just gives an overall more painterly look to your painting. So omit it if you don't like that look, but I really like that painterly look, so I almost always include a little of that in each painting I do. Here I added a little bit more water to my yellow cadmium medium just to give it a little more of a yellow glow to that one corner where I feel like the light source is coming from. If you add more than a third water to your acrylic paints, it really breaks down the structure of the paint. After it's dry, it won't be as durable. So I recommend 2 coats of clear coat as a finishing touch to your painting if you use a lot of water with your paints. When you're finished, don't forget to sign your work. If you're uncomfortable signing your name with a paintbrush, I've seen some artists use a paint marker or even a Sharpie marker. If you use the latter, again, a couple coats of clear coat, especially one that protects against UV rays, will make it much more durable. Well, there's Murphy. I hope you got a lot out of this tutorial and you paint your own pet and maybe even some pets for your friends and family. Let me know in the comments how you did. Also, if you liked this video, give it a like and share it with anyone you think would also like it. Thanks a lot for being here. See you next Tuesday for another step-by-step tutorial.